Good morning, and that was very echoey. Welcome to UUCC, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua. We are a group of spiritual freethinkers who gather to celebrate life, build community, and better the world.
Sorry to interrupt. Gail,
Yeah.
your laptop is making sound and echoing here into the front end.
Mine?
Really distracting. You just turn the volume off.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. We make things up as we go along sometimes.
Good sleuthing, Bill.
I could hear it, but couldn't quite figure out where it was coming from.
Thank you very much.
We are a group of spiritual freethinkers who gather to celebrate life, build community, and better the world. Wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. I'm Karen Alvarez, your worship associate for this morning, and facilitator for our Justice Sunday Simple Service. The Sunday will be a bit different than our usual format to allow time for everyone to stay for a presentation and discussion with our special guest, Gail Newth from Rochester area, Interfaith Climate Action. Gail moved to the Finger Lakes 2 years ago after being impacted by repeated wildfires in Colorado. She graduated from Colorado College and earned her Master's Divinity from Yale Divinity School. Don't abbreviate things. I'm not good with that. Her concern for climate gave her the opportunity to represent Colorado College at COP25 in Madrid, Spain in 2019. The COP was eye-opening and motivated Gail to work on climate issues for the sake of current and future generations. As a former United Methodist minister, Gail's particular interest is in the role of faith communities in addressing climate change. She leads a Rochester area interfaith clergy group committed to the topic. Her quotes have been published in the National Resource Defense Council blog, the Colorado College Bulletin, and the Colorado Springs Gazette. Thank you to everyone on this morning's worship team, also including music by Bill Mills and technical assistance, and Children's Church for Children 3 and over by Pat and Kaya Mills. If this is your first visit, welcome. We invite you to sign the visitor's book in the entryway, and whether it's your first visit or your 1,000th, we are glad that you came. This service is also being live streamed to our YouTube channel. We will plan on continuing with hybrid worship services, so you can join us each week here in person, on Zoom, or later on YouTube. To help us connect better with our friends watching from home, please turn around to give a wave to the camera. I have a few announcements to share with you today. If you have a joy or sorrow to share, please fill out the card on your chair. We invite you to bring them forward and place them in the basket. It's way down there now. After Bill rings the chimes and begins to play. You can also come forward to drop a pebble in the water at that time if you have a joy or sorrow that you prefer not to share. The monthly meeting of the Social Environmental Justice Committee will follow Gail's talk this morning. We'll be working on planning upcoming learning and outreach activities, including Earth Day activities and a civic engagement event for May. If you would like to join the meeting over Zoom, please let us know in the chat, and we'll add you to the breakout room when the meeting starts. Rochester LGBTQ+ Together will be hosting a Greater Rochester rally for our rights today at 2 o'clock at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Park at Manhattan Square. The event is held in partnership and solidarity with Next Generation Men of Transition, Pride at Work, Rochester Finger Lakes Chapter, Rainbow Seniors ROC, Rock Trans Alliance of Greater Rochester, Transparent Rochester, New York, Transparent Rochester, New York, Wave Women, Inc., and We Exist Coalition of the Finger Lakes, along with other special guest speakers. Finger Lakes Justice Partnership will be hosting their first People's Parliament and community meal today. Doors open at 4 p.m. for the meal in the downstairs meeting space at St. Mark's Church in Penn Yan. At 5 o'clock, members of the Party for Socialism and Liberation will give a presentation on immigrant support. We are looking for volunteers to assist with coffee hour after services. There's a sign-up sheet on the refrigerator in the kitchen, and if you need more information or have questions, you can reach out to Kaya Meltz. We are collecting fabric to add to the squares, add squares to the tapestries to represent individuals or families of new joiners. If you do not already have a square to symbolize your participation and commitment, please bring 2 fabric options so that we can add you. There's a box by the front door that you can drop them in. Please keep your selections together. If you add your name, that will be helpful. We're hoping to get started on the additions in early March, which I now realize is next week. So if you need a little extra time, let me know. If we're good to go, then I'll figure it out. Are there any other announcements for the good of the community?
Morning. Just want to let you all know that there are child-proof locks on those drawers in the cupboard on the other side of that wall. And so when you pull them open and it catches, please stop pulling. You can just put your finger in there or a pencil or something and unlock that drawer.
Thank you. As we prepare to be fully together, I remind you to silence your phones and devices. We now enter a space of worship, and now is the time to bring forward any joys and sorrows and drop a pebble in the water if you are so inclined. I invite you to join with me in our chalice lighting words as the flame is lit. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
I know I don't look like a runner. However, over the past few years, running is a big part of who I've become. I kind of believe, not really, that when people see me moving out at the pace of their brisk walk, that they won't mock me. But I implicitly trust that they won't go out of their way to harm me. At least more than I trust the icy sidewalks of February. To run on the slushy shoulder of the city streets, I pull on a stunningly bright yellow windbreaker to announce my presence as a runner and ask for, at a minimum, enough recognition of my existence so the cars don't run me over. Most even slow down and make extra space to ensure my safety. On Thursday, I planned a route down South Pearl Street where city crews were working to repair a water main break. This unexpected but necessary detour led me to the much smaller Mason Street, where several people were out doing their best to remove ice and snow from the sidewalk. When I thanked them for caring for our community in this way, one woman responded, "We do our best to look out for people around here." And I think that's why we come to church, especially this church. We recently learned of the tragic death of Sam Nordquist, a man who came to visit our area last fall and was tortured for over a month before his murder. The investigators are saying that there's no evidence of a hate crime, but I feel certain that as a trans man of color, help was further from reach for Sam than it would have been for most of us. Our system and our community failed to meet the basic expectation of looking out for him and keeping him safe. On Monday night, the Family Counseling Services of the Finger Lakes held a community event focused on trans resilience and memorializing Sam's life. Based on the outpouring of support online, it seemed likely that the space at the library would not be enough to hold everyone who wanted to attend. As larger churches and gathering spaces sat empty and dark, we were able to open our doors as an overflow location for people to watch the live stream together on Zoom. We didn't know how needed the space would be, but this building was the most full that I have ever seen it. What we were able to offer was a safe and warm space for people to gather, remember, and mourn, free from judgment, surrounded by love. This Sunday was supposed to be all about hope and climate justice, and it's central to our values how caring for our planet is a way that we can care for everyone, to protect each other from pollution, severe weather, natural disasters, and rising sea levels. We will still be getting to that message today, but thank you for joining me on this necessary detour. For what it all comes down to, what we do around here is look out for one another with love. Please rise as you are able, in body or in spirit, and join in our first hymn, number 131 in the gray hymnal, Love Will Guide Us.
Love will guide us, peace is our
Now is the time in our service to join together in the spiritual practice of generosity. Our gifts of both time and money support our church in its work. Each week, we would like to spotlight a group or committee and thank them for their gift of time. On these Justice Sundays, we would like to thank all of you for being the kind of community that comes together to better the world and for bringing your sense of curiosity and adventure to new projects. 1/4 of our plate collection for the frozen season will go to our service partner, Rochester Area Interfaith Climate Action. RECA is a group of individuals and organizations of faith in the Rochester regional area seeking to create a meaningful response to climate change. In doing so, they acknowledge their common conviction to care for the earth and its people. You can give to this morning's offering by placing cash or a check into the basket or by one of the options on your screen. Please make a note that your gift is intended for today's offering. We now gratefully accept the offering. It's all right, we'll just get emotional if that happens. This is from Bill, but I think we all share the sentiment of sorrow at the murder of Sam Nordquist and joy and comfort in the gathering of community. I'll now drop a stone for this and all of the other joys and sorrows that we have in the silence of our heart. We are ready. At this time, if there's any children who would like to go downstairs for Children's Church, you can go now with Kaya and Pat. Today, as we sit together in shared silence and then sing our meditation hymn, I would like to invite you to come up and light a candle in memory of Sam and in commitment toward a future where we prioritize community care. I'm going to do a demonstration. Please take a moment now to settle into your seats. Take a deep breath and feel the ground beneath your feet as I share with you a few words from our minister, the Reverend Eileen Casey Campbell. The first sip of espresso hits the back of my tongue, like bitter herbs on the Seder plate, bitter water in the wilderness, dredging up the bitterness of so many ancestors scattered like seeds. Calls up their panic from deep in my bones, the specter of nowhere, safe nowhere home. At lunch, we talk casually of how to shepherd trans passengers out of the fascist regimes in this land that is all I know, and in no way mine. We make plans and beg monies, and my ancestors who ran away and away and away are wailing somewhere inside. You too are nowhere safe, nowhere home. Clothed in the armor of blue lipstick, laughter, and each other, we go and dance until morning, move our bodies in a sea of queer joy, and sing our rage and our heartbreak and wave after wave of fear. The promises we make to one another and to our ancestors in our singing and our dancing, and every gentle hand reaching out, turn the bitter water sweet. You are safe with me. My heart will be a home for yours. After we extinguish our chalice to close our worship service, we hope that you'll take a few minutes to stretch, grab a cup of tea or coffee, and come back to make yourself comfortable in a spot where you can easily see the monitor for Gail's presentation. In this time of turmoil, finding hope is an important form of resistance. Please join me in our words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Just shut off my Zoom because I couldn't find the mute fast enough, so I think you have to let me back in. Okay. Sorry.
Try to get it a little more central.
Yeah, makes sense. I think I'm good. Thank you very much.
We promise we'll tell you if anything starts to look funny with the presentation, but it will be up on the screen.
Okay,
Whatever's on your screen, you'll see.
okay. It's not up there yet, huh?
It is.
Oh, it is. Okay. So are you ready for me to go? Do we have?
I think we are.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me today.
If you can stay just a little closer to the microphone, and if it helps, we could move it to the in-between space between.
Okay, perfect.
I'll let Bill.
To the other side for you.
Sure,
I think maybe.
that'd be great. Thank you.
Maybe we'll get flowers. It's got pretty. Anywhere in this neighborhood, it should be.
That's perfect. So we're gathered as a people of faith, and as we talk about climate today, please think about how you can look at climate from a faith perspective. Specifically, think about the values of the Unitarian faith: generosity, transformation, equity, pluralism, interdependence, justice, and of course, love. To give you a little bit of information about myself, my climate change journey began in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. I was working at a bank, and we distributed FEMA funds to people who had been displaced by the hurricane. I had heard that the frequency and intensity of storms would increase with global warming, but it didn't seem real to me until I sat across the desk from shell-shocked people who had lost everything. They lost their homes, their neighborhoods, their schools and churches and places of employment. Their community was scattered. And most importantly, their sense of safety and security was gone. Little did I know that I would have a climate event of my own a few years later. This is the Waldo Canyon fire barreling downhill towards my neighborhood in Colorado Springs. Fires don't usually go downhill, but a combination of severe drought and 65-mile-an-hour winds made the flames go down the foothills and into our neighborhood. We were under mandatory evacuation orders for 3 days. I'll never forget my horror as I watched the sheriff's briefings, where they listed the houses that were destroyed, street number by street number. I was lucky. 2 people died, and several of my friends lost their homes. Burn scars are often at risk of flooding. The intense heat destroys vegetation, making the soil unable to absorb water. And in addition, a water-repelling surface often forms on the scar on the dirt. We had flash flooding in the area for several years following the fire, especially in hilly places. This led to more loss of property. Now fast forward a few years. This is my daughter's neighborhood in Boulder County, Colorado. She and her husband loaded 2 kids and 2 dogs into the car while cinders and ash rained down on top of them. The air was so thick, it was hard to see. Tens of thousands of people were ordered to evacuate at the same time. It took my daughter several hours to get out of the neighborhood because everyone was trying to leave all at once. When they finally arrived at my house, 90 minutes away, they arrived with no toothbrushes, no change of clothes, no dog food, no information about the status of their home, and 2 very tired and traumatized kids. 1,084 homes were were burned, and many more were damaged. This is the scene my grandchildren saw every day for months after the fire, every time they entered or left their neighborhood. Their home survived, but it looked like they lived in a war zone. And so we decided it was time to move to a climate haven. We were tired of breathing the smoke from wildfires in Colorado and also from the wildfires all over the western United States. We chose the Finger Lakes region, and our first summer here, we had horrible smoke from the wildfires in Canada. Ironic. But the poor air quality reminded me that although some areas may fare better than others, no one is exempt from climate change. We are all in this together. Here is our agenda for today. We will look at the latest research on climate change. We'll explore the ethical and social implications. We'll take a minute to check in with each other after that. And then we'll move on to things you can do and reasons for hope. There is still a lot that scientists don't know about climate change. We are learning as we go, creating models to try to understand and predict how rising temperatures will affect the complex systems that govern our planet. But one thing is certain. More than 97% of scientists agree that climate change is overwhelmingly the result of human activity. 2024 was the Earth's hottest year on record, followed by 2023, which set the prior record. The effects of climate change aren't uniform. This chart, or this map, shows you the temperature changes compared to a 1968 baseline. And you can see that the northern hemisphere is warming the fastest, and Europe appears to be the fastest warming continent. Heat-trapping gases are the culprit. The main ones are carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. Okay, so how are these affecting our planet? The first is with the retreat and disappearance of glaciers. The Greenland ice sheet is disappearing 4 times faster than it was 40 years ago. And scientists predict that in the summer, the Arctic could be ice-free as soon as 2030. As these glaciers melt, the water has to go somewhere, and it ends up in the ocean, leading to sea level rise. The glacial melt is also interfering with the Atlantic meridional current. This current regulates ocean temperatures by moving water between the northern and southern hemispheres. Normally, cool water sinks and moves from the north down to the south. But glacial melt, which is made up of fresh water, is less dense than the salt water, and so it doesn't sink. This is interfering with the current that regulates global ocean temperature. If this continues or increases, it could have devastating impact on marine life and also on our global climate. Our sea ice is also melting. This shows you the average level of sea ice over a 30-year period as compared to a particular day, September 19th, 2023. And you can see that our current sea ice level is depleting. It's about 13% lower per decade over the last 30 years. So why is this a problem? It's a problem because of a thing called albedo. Pop quiz. Does anybody know what albedo is?
Light reflected by the surface.
Bingo. So you get a prize. Climate change, climate world. All right. So, albedo measures how much of the sun's energy is reflected. And light surfaces reflect a lot back into the atmosphere. Dark surfaces reflect a little. Notice the albedo of ocean water, 0.06. That means that open ocean water reflects 6% of the sun's energy and absorbs the rest. Now look at ocean ice. It reflects 50 to 70% of the sun's energy and absorbs the rest. So as sea ice melts, the resulting open ocean water absorbs 94% of the sun's energy. This leads to warming of the water. And so our oceans are getting hotter. And of course, as they get hotter, more sea ice melts, creating a feedback loop where warming leads to even more warming. As oceans warm, they also fuel more frequent and intense tropical storms. At the same time, sea level rise is exacerbating storm surge flooding. So let's move on from warming oceans to warming on the land. Heat waves kill more people in the United States than any other weather-related event. In cities, heat islands intensify the problem. Tall buildings block airflow, and surfaces like asphalt absorb the heat. Some neighborhoods feel it worse than others and can be up to 20 degrees warmer than other parts of the city. The most vulnerable zones tend to be in the same communities that are marginalized and underserved. These places have dense housing, lots of asphalt, few trees, and less green space. And many of those people can't afford air conditioning. Another marginalized group being affected by these warming temperatures are native indigenous Alaskan tribes. They are at risk from thawing permafrost. Almost a quarter of the land in the northern hemisphere is on top of permafrost. Permafrost is a combination of soil, rocks, and sand that are held together by ice. And it's solid except for the very top active layer that thaws and refreezes. As temperatures rise, the active thawing layer deepens. Thawing can destroy houses, roads, and other infrastructure. This is a picture of a house in Fairbanks, Alaska. They built the house with the pylons going down into the solid permafrost, which is harder than concrete when it's frozen. But since the thawing has gone deeper, the house has begun to sink. And this is happening to many, many areas in Alaska. I heard at the last COP that 3 native tribes had voted to move just recently. Thawing of permafrost creates another feedback loop. When it's frozen, the plant and animal matter that is stuck in the permafrost is dormant, but once it's exposed to air, microbes begin to decompose that organic matter. That releases greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and they estimate that there's twice as much carbon in that organic matter in the permafrost than there is in the atmosphere currently. And so we get another feedback loop where the warming thaws the permafrost, which releases more gases and increases more warming. Thawing permafrost causes flooding. We're also finding that flooding is increasing just in the cities with global warming. Most climate models predict that wet places will get wetter and dry places will get drier. I was surprised to see this kind of flooding in Vermont just recently. Some climate models predict more variability where locations will experience both severe drought and extreme flooding, alternating at different times. So the physical impact of climate change is growing. Not so visible, but just as important are the ethical and moral issues that this brings about. The first that we're going to look at is a matter of justice. The countries listed here are the top greenhouse gas emitters. They represent 2/3 of total carbon emissions.
Can you call them out? Because you can't read them.
Oh, good. The top three are China, the United States, and India, followed by Russia, Japan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Germany, South Korea, and Canada. So the top three, China, United States, and India. Now this is the total output for the country. Let's look at it on a per capita basis. Russia moves from number 4 to number 1. And India, who was number 3 as a nation, moves way down on the list in terms of their per capita output. The United States remains in the number 2 spot for both. Now look at the top 10 countries who are most vulnerable to extreme heat events. Democratic Republic of Congo, Central African Republic, Nigeria, Chad, Ethiopia, Bangladesh, Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia, and South Sudan. Those who contributed the least to the problem are the ones who will be affected the most. What is our moral obligation to them? We have equity issues to consider as well. We expect a huge increase in demand for concrete by 2050 as underdeveloped nations begin to advance. These countries want a better life for their people, and they need to develop an infrastructure. Concrete already accounts for 8% of total global carbon output. Increased demand will have devastating impacts on our climate. But who are we to say, we got our bridges and our roads, but you can't develop yours? And you can see from this chart that what is happening already is that the developed nations like the European Union and the US are starting to decline in their carbon output, but the developing nations are on an upward trajectory. There's also an issue of economics to consider. Who will pay the cost of climate change? The easy answer is that we will all pay with our economy. Insurance rates will continue to rise, and insurance may be difficult to get in some areas. As of 2023, Allstate and State Farm stopped writing new homeowner policies in the state of California. And 20% of homeowners in Florida don't have property insurance because it's too expensive. We will pay with our taxes. Extreme climate events now cost US taxpayers $150 billion annually. That number is expected to rise as the climate warms. A decrease in crop production is predicted. Many crops don't grow well beyond a narrow temperature range. There will be scarcity. I guess according to this picture, there'll be scarcity for everything except cauliflower. But scarcity leads to rising prices, and that's going to be passed on to the consumer. In the US, $2 billion per year can be lost in tourism, especially winter snow activities. You wouldn't believe it this year, but I did last year. And extreme weather threatens supply chains. I experienced this firsthand when my sister-in-law had to delay a necessary surgery because Hurricane Helene damaged the facility that produces IV bags. And as it gets warmer, worker productivity will decrease in hot areas of the U.S. So our economy will pay the price, but there is more. The United Nations Conference of Parties, known as the COP, is a group of 198 nations who have signed a treaty to work on the issue of climate change. The Paris Agreement that you've probably heard of comes out of the COP. They call for differentiated responsibility. Basically, they say that the countries who have contributed the most to climate change should pay more of the cost. And they have developed a fund, it's a loss and damage fund, and have called on us to contribute our fair share as the number 2 emitter. Are we going to meet our obligation to that treaty? Finally, I want to look at the implication of influence, or the issue of influence. Oil and gas lobbyists were granted admission to the COP last year and outnumbered almost every single national delegation. This was a huge conflict of interest for oil and gas to have that much of a presence at the COP, while member nations were discussing plans to phase out oil and gas. Corporate profits took precedent over the health of our planet. Here at home, the oil and gas industry contributed $26 million to help elect the policymakers who took office in January. And they gave much more through political action committees that are outside of campaign contribution limits. And our current administration has slashed funding for the Inflation Reduction Act, which incentivizes clean energy, withdrawn the United States from the Paris Agreement, frozen federal wind energy permits, and nominated a climate denier to head the EPA. So it makes me wonder why I bother composting my apple core. But there is hope, and we're going to move on to that. But let me just stop here and check in. Any comments, any questions on what we've covered so far?
I think we can put a microphone next to the monitor so that everybody on Zoom can hear, and we can also let people on Zoom unmute their microphones if they have something to say. So if anybody here has something to say and doesn't mind coming up to this spot, the people on Zoom can hear it the first time.
And if not, we'll move on. There's no pressure. I just want to make sure we're all together.
And so the folks on Zoom are able to unmute.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I didn't
Okay.
If you could invite them one more time if they were planning to talk.
Oh, do I have to invite them?
Oh, no, just verbally.
Oh.
They can't hear me.
Oh, if you would like to talk, now is your chance to ask questions or make comments. All right, we're going to move on. And now we're going to talk about what we do next. This is where we look at hope and things that we can do to make a difference. It's a scary thing to hope in the face of despair, but that is the first thing we need to do because we are a people of faith, and people of faith are people of hope. When I studied theology, I fell in love with the prophetic tradition in the Hebrew Scriptures. The prophets called on the people to turn from their sins and change their ways, but they also preached hope. Hope and judgment went hand in hand. Our job as people of faith is to speak the unpleasant truth about our unsustainable lifestyles and the damage we're doing to God's creation. But we are also called to be examples of hope as we push for change. And there are a lot of things happening that give us reason to hope. Solar investment is on the rise globally. Electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids accounted for over 20% of new car sales in 2024. 22 U.S. states and 2 territories have formed the U.S. Climate Alliance with a goal of securing America's net zero future. They represent, yay, they represent 54% of the United States population and 57% of the U.S. economy. And you'll notice New York is one of those states. Here are some specific things that New York is doing. Food waste laws for institutions and businesses are tightening in New York, which will result in more edible food waste being donated to food banks and more non-edible waste being processed to create biofuel. No fossil fuel equipment like gas stoves will be allowed in new buildings in New York starting in 2029. New York State is implementing electric school buses over time. Starting in 2027, all new school buses purchased must be electric, and the entire fleet will be electric by 2035. And Governor Hochul recently announced plans to decarbonize campuses across the state university and city university systems. Using the state's Environmental Bond Act, they're going to begin electrifying campuses and integrating clean energy technology. So there's lots of reason to hope. The next thing we need to do is hold our elected officials accountable. And that means we need to get political. Vote for candidates who are climate friendly. Become a candidate yourself. You can make a difference even at a local level. Contact your representatives. And if you happen to be in Claudia Tenney's district, we are lobbying her in about a week and a half, and I have a letter. It really is impactful if we show up with a big stack of letters. So please stay after. It's a quick and easy one that you can do. Show up at town hall meetings and also protest. This is an example of a successful protest. Fossil fuel companies lobbied Governor Hochul for months to veto the Climate Change Superfund Act. This is a bill that was sitting on her desk for months after passing through the legislature. This past December, a group of activists had a 3-day sit-in at the state capitol. They urged Governor Hochul to sign the bill into law before the end of the year. And on December 26th, she signed the bill. Okay, so hope, hold your elected officials accountable, and then the next thing we need to do is reduce our own carbon footprint. Another quiz. Globally, the average person's carbon footprint per year is 4 tons. What do you think an individual in the United States is? What'd you say?
8.
8? You're low.
10.
You're low. 15. You're very close. Go a little higher. 16. You got it. And you also get a book. Okay, there's a bonus question. What is the goal for a person's average carbon footprint per year in order to keep the Earth's warming below 2 degrees Celsius?
4.
That's high.
0.6.
That's low. Two. Who said that? Ooh, chocolate. Chocolate's high on the global carbon output thing, so this is very precious. I told my husband there are things I will give up, but chocolate and coffee are two that I don't, because I'm not fun to live with without them. All right. So there are 7 very simple things you can do that will dramatically reduce your carbon footprint. And just so you're aware, we can collectively reduce carbon output by 25% just by working on these 7 simple steps. The first one is eat less meat. My brother-in-law, who I practiced this on, told me that I needed a different slide because all this does is makes him want to go out for a good steak dinner. But replacing beef with a different protein, even for just one meal, can reduce that day's food carbon output by 50%. And if you go vegetarian for a whole year, that would be the equivalent of driving 2,475 miles less per year. Here's why. It takes 11 times more fossil fuel to produce a unit of protein than it does, a unit of animal protein than it does to produce a unit of plant-based protein. That's because the crops that we use to feed cattle are energy intensive. And then after slaughter, you have to process, refrigerate, and transport the meat. In addition to those fossil fuel requirements, meat production isn't climate friendly because forests are often cut down for grazing, and ruminant animals produce a lot of methane gas. So learn to like beans. The second thing you can do is reduce food waste. 1/3 of the food intended for human consumption is wasted in the United States. The production, the transportation, and the handling of food generates a lot of carbon dioxide. And then when it ends up in landfills, the wasted food also generates methane, which is an even more potent greenhouse gas. So the USDA says that food waste and loss in the US creates as much carbon as 42 coal-fired power plants annually. If we just plan better and only buy what we need, we can reduce food waste and save money too. The third thing you can do is compost when you do have waste. Composting and rotting in landfill both produce greenhouse gases. The difference is that composting is aerobic. That's why you stir it, to get it oxygenated, and that produces mostly carbon dioxide. When it rots in a landfill, it is anaerobic and produces methane. Methane is much more powerful. So compost. Invest in clean energy. Wind power currently provides 10% of the United States energy, and that's the equivalent of eliminating 73 million cars. It's a clean, renewable resource. And you can sign up for wind energy through Rochester Gas and Electric. It starts at $5 a month for 100 kilowatt hours, and you can indicate how many units you want to purchase. So, if all of us signed up for a little bit of wind energy, it would have a huge impact. Plant trees. Trees remove carbon dioxide from the air. They provide cooling shade. And evaporation of water through their leaves is like a natural air conditioning system. Do any of you guys order the bare root trees that the counties sell every year? Some of you do. I did that last year, and I'm doing it this year. You can order them. You get like 25 trees for $20, and they're little teeny tiny things. Someone told me that they went to pick up their trees, and they thought they'd be big. They had a trailer, and then they get this little packet. But you can plant trees, and it'll make a difference. Number 6, be a conscious consumer. This chart shows you that production and sales of clothing doubled over a 15-year period. But the declining aqua line shows you that the number of times we wore those things declined. Fast fashion is a huge emitter. The goal is to buy fewer things, to appreciate what you have, and to wear those things longer. And finally, we can't all go out and buy a new car, but when you do need a new car, consider electric. Over the life of the car, which includes manufacturing, battery production, end-of-life disposal, and operation, electric vehicles produce much less carbon dioxide than gasoline cars. I can't control the lobbying efforts of the oil and gas industry, but I take joy in knowing that I can reduce demand for one of their products. And a hybrid helps too. It's a little bit cheaper to get into, but it's also lower emitting than gasoline combustion engines. Okay. So, we've worked on reducing our carbon footprint. The last thing we're going to talk about today is working together. When I'm trying to make a lifestyle change, I find it helpful to be with people who share similar values. We learn from each other and hold each other accountable. This was my sustainable living group in Colorado. We called ourselves the Cool Chicks. My daughter assured me we weren't. We studied books, and we also started our own little circular economy. We shared things that we no longer wanted, hand-me-down clothes, housewares. We traded plants, we shared produce from our gardens, and we encouraged each other to live a more sustainable lifestyle. You might find that helpful to start a group here at your church that's a sustainable living group, or maybe in your neighborhood. I found that the camaraderie was inspiring and the peer pressure was helpful. Or you may want to consider joining one of these local groups who are taking action on climate in the community. I belong to several of them, and they all do really good work. The group that I'm representing today is Reka, and you learned a little bit about them at the beginning of the service. We welcome all faith communities and would love for you to join. I'll have a sign-up sheet here up front at the end if you want to give us your contact info. So why am I, an introvert, encouraging us to get together and work in groups? It's because there's great power in working together. Think with me for a moment about the 1950s in Montgomery, Alabama. Segregation was the norm. People of color paid the same bus fare as white people, but they had to sit at the back. And if a white person needed their seat, they had to give up their seat or be arrested by the deputized bus driver. Individuals had very little power to change the system until they banded together and boycotted the buses. They walked to work, some as many as 8 miles a day. They rode their bicycles. They carpooled. There were 100 carpool spots around the city, and people volunteered their cars. For 381 days, buses were virtually empty in Montgomery, Alabama. The boycott continued at great inconvenience, but they stuck to it until segregation had its day in court. These individuals found strength in numbers and moved our countries towards positive change by working together. The things I suggested today may feel like a little drop in a bucket, but don't underestimate their power. Every individual can make an impact, and if we do it in unison, the impact will grow larger. Our cause will gain traction as we build hope, because hope is contagious. Our brothers and sisters in Montgomery, Alabama showed us that by binding together, we can move the needle towards positive change. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Oops. So, if anybody would like, I'd love to hear if there's anything that you heard that you might like to try to implement. Yeah.
Up to the microphone.
Sorry.
We put one to the right side of the television. I'm not sure if you were here when we did that.
Oh, that one?
Yeah. Thanks for taking the long trip up there.
No problem. It's on my to-do list to contact RG&E and request wind energy. I haven't done it yet, but it's been on the list, but hopefully it'll get done soon.
Great, thank you. We have someone coming.
With regard to holding electables accountable, for those of you who don't know, which I think probably most of you know, I serve on city council, but I'm also the chairperson for the Climate Smart Communities Task Force for the city. So a lot of citizens, as well as elected officials and government, other government people. So we're always trying to work on what we can do better within the city to try to move us forward. Currently, the different programs that we're working through with the state, we're already 5-star CEC and silver level CSC. So as far as the state goes, we've done our job, but as I say, we're not going to sit and rest on that. We're constantly looking for how we can better do that, and we're actually starting a climate emergency response, like doing a plan for how we can respond to climate emergencies. So that's going to be kind of an ongoing thing, but always hold electeds accountable, and there are some friendly faces here in Canandaigua.
Thank you for serving on that. Do you find contact from constituents to be helpful?
Yes, definitely. Not just communication. We would love if people showed up and engaged, but just kind of lending support or things like that. Because as we come to budget time and we're looking for what are we going to allocate our limited resources to, knowing that this is an important thing that we keep our eye on is very important. So.
When's the next meeting?
Next meeting of CSE is, we don't have one currently on the books, but I do know in March we're going to meet with a similar organization, all community-led. So I think it's the third Tuesday of March. We're meeting with a group in Geneva to try to, they're trying to get their feet under themselves. So, trying to work on that. And we've also tried to work with group in Honeoye to get them up and going as well. So always trying to
So
expand
for
that.
us, if people want to show up,
Yes.
that's when they can show up.
Yep. Yep.
Great.
I live in Seneca Falls, and I love the idea of a sustainable living group. I'm going to see if I can get one started here in Seneca Falls. And like Megan, because in Seneca Falls we don't have RG&E, we have NICEAG, but I intend to contact NICEAG about the wind energy too. I think those are both great ideas.
Oh, great. And those have an added benefit of friendships as well as changing a lifestyle.
Right.
Great.
I was very struck by the connections between the memorial for Sam Norquist and the discussion of climate change, especially with the introduction of climate change is centered on faith-based values. And I'd like us all to think about ways we can make connections between those personally important issues, cultural issues, and climate and ecology issues that our collective fear of diversity and desire for, whether it's a monoculture in a social setting or in an agricultural setting, that the winnowing of diversity is in all of those dimensions part of the destructiveness that we see going on. So I hope that we can find ways, again, to connect that idea of embracing a multitude of voices, ways of living, with that need for action on climate change.
Thank you.
My mom and I were just talking about this yesterday when we were at the grocery store. It definitely wouldn't kill us to be a lot more conscious about less meat that we eat. So
Great. Yeah. I appreciate.
That's a good question.
Please do.
I don't think I have to stand up. They can probably hear me. This is just kind of a practical level question. Industrial composting, is that, what are the thoughts about industrial composting?
You mean like businesses and
city
cities?
says
And
we're going to take your compost, and so you deliver it to the city, often in little eco bags.
I would love, I don't know if you could hear it on the Zoom. The question was about citywide composting or industrial composting. And I was actually surprised we don't have it here. I was used to modeling in Colorado. And also when I go to California to take care of my mother-in-law, it's the same, where you've got your bin for composting, your bin for recycling, and your bin for trash. And the trash bin is usually the smallest. And all three of those are put out every week. And so I was surprised that we don't have it here. And I realize we're more of a rural setting, and you've got to look at how much fuel and gas goes into someone picking it up. But I know there is Impact Earth that does a lot of composting for like churches and organizations like that. But in terms of our personal household use, I haven't found a very good solution other than doing it in my own backyard. Do you have thoughts on that, Danielle?
Currently, the town of Canandaigua and the city of Geneva have compost either drop-off or collection. So that could be something to try to bring to our other communities, because we are spread out throughout the Finger Lakes region. So if we're talking about talking to our elected officials, we could look to other communities that already have community-level composting as an idea.
I would love that in Bloomfield. That'd be awesome.
Geneva has a program. Oh, I'm sorry.
So I came across someone online that said that they were a part of a co-op. That's energy generation and transmission co-op. I thought it was interesting, so I asked them about it, and they said that their co-op was actually fairly large. It had 24,000 members. And then there were 16 other small rural co-ops spread out that formed for like one big one to, kind of come close to their size. And they use landfill methane, solar, hydropower, and wind. And they said that their bills are like a lot lower than the neighboring counties, and also they get overpayment checks as well. So
what's the
I don't know
name
if
of it
anybody's
again?
heard of those energy co-ops.
What was the name of the co-op again?
I don't know. I'll have to ask them again, but I just came across them yesterday, so I'll have to see if I can talk to them more and get like the name of it.
Great.
Geneva has a program, but they pick up weekly here in Seneca Falls too, but I delete their emails, so I don't remember the name of the company. I was trying to look it up in my email, but I deleted them and then emptied my trash, so I can't even look in the trash.
Thank you for the work that you all are doing, and I enjoyed the spirit of the morning. It was very refreshing and fulfilling. It was great to be here, and thank you for caring about issues like this. It's what makes a difference in the world. So.